when you are running your own business, there's no point in having all the moans that people who have to be in an office from 9 till 6 every day, and they can't just go, oh well, I've finished everything I need to do for the day, I'm going to clock off at 4. We can do that, so if we don't do it, then what a waste.
Hello everyone, I'm Mark and welcome to my podcast, People Behind Brands, brought to you by Making Websites Better. In each episode, I'm joined by an inspirational guest to hear more about their individual life lessons and how it shaped them into who they are today. To never miss an episode, subscribe to our exclusive content now and follow us on our social media platforms. People Behind Brands, life lessons from the world of business. A company brand is much more than just a logo and some pretty colours. Natalie Moores from Mac+Moore helps business leaders solve tomorrow's problems by moving brands forward. During this episode, we touch upon her creative flair in all aspects of her life. In amongst building the Mac+Moore business, Natalie also has a passion for spoken word and creating poetry, which is based on her dating history, which she reveals has turned into a humorous and deep collection she is proud to call her own. Natalie's bubbly personality shines throughout this episode, where she touches upon arriving in the big city of London from her northern roots, more dating mishaps, and how a family emergency when she was 14 impacted her core values and why family is so important to her. This is one of my most favourite interviews to date, and I know you'll enjoy it as much as I did from this incredible guest. Okay, Natalie, welcome to People Behind Brands podcast. How you doing?
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Yeah, all good, all good. End of the day, but feeling good.
Yeah. So we're recording on Tuesday, towards the end of the day. So yeah. So where are you today? Where can we find you today?
I'm at home today. I've got a very lazy cat asleep behind me, which has been, a nice little pal for the day working. We've basically, we were in an office space and we've decided to have a pause on it for the summer. So I'm actually working from home, which I'm getting more used to. I think it's, takes a little while. What about you?
Yeah, I was going to say, talk to me about cats, because I've got 2 cats. When I work from home, they can be quite annoying.
So I'm not a cat person, and I have recently moved in with my partner who owns a cat, and he has completely won me over, like unexpectedly. But we basically have a game in the day. Like sometimes he'll just lie and sleep and be good, and then we have a game where we like hunt each other throughout the house. And so that can be quite distracting when he wants to play that game, and I've like got a presentation to build.
Yeah, very much. I can appreciate that. So in the early days of Making Websites Better, we first became aware of Natalie's talents, collaborating on brand projects with her business, Mac+Moore. Throughout Natalie's extensive career, she's worked with many fantastic clients, specialising in brand elements such as strategy, positioning, design, and creative campaigns. Natalie leads the creative output on their projects, and with her extensive experience in content marketing and brand development, Mac+Moore are perfect for B2B tech, SaaS companies, and non-profit organisations. So, but as these are life lessons, Natalie, obviously we want you to open up a little bit from the kind of world of business and also your personal life. So we'll delve into that shortly. But I just wanted to say that I think the last time I saw you, obviously it was with Paul and I in London, and we were having a meeting, like a business meeting, and then afterwards you said that you had to go because you was going on a date. So how did that date go?
Oh, I remember that now. I remember I was going on. So who knows who I was going on a date with at that point. But since then, I went on a very successful date, which has resulted in me meeting someone who I've recently, last month, moved in with. So, I feel like you and Paul had some very positive words for me about,
yes,
just keep going. And
yeah, I think we were trying to give you a bit of a pep talk, but we did have a few drinks that day as well. So I don't know whether the advice actually came through or not. It sounds like it didn't actually, considering if it didn't go that well. Did it go well?
Do you know what? All of those dates have led me to meeting James, my current partner. So it was, they do say in the world of business, and I do think it's the same in the world of dating. It's either success or learning, and boy, did I have a lot of learnings.
Yeah, kiss a few frogs and all that. So yeah.
Yeah.
So perhaps you could start by telling us a little bit about your early years and how you worked your way up to, you know, your obviously career ladder. As I noticed that you've got great experience in content and marketing. So tell us a little bit about your sort of early career.
Yeah, so basically I grew up in the north of England and went to uni in Loughborough. I was the first person in my family, a direct family, to go to university. And really that just kind of, I'd always been interested in words, and I was a big reader. And so I really approached going into the world of work from a much more like creative writing perspective. I got a master's in creative writing after my BA. And it was really how I could take everything I'd learned about the writing from a creative side. So I didn't have any professional like marketing qualifications or anything like that. But what I did have was this ability to kind of build a character, tell a story, play with language. I've always written poetry, so I've found like huge crossovers with that and the world of copywriting. And I moved to London about 11 years ago, got a job which, no word of a lie, was paid 12 grand a year.
Oh.
This is like back in 2013 or something, 2012, 2013. So it's 12 grand a year, and it was working for like a rubbish daily deals company. I won't name them, they don't exist anymore. And basically I started out as a daily deals copywriter. So I would literally, you know, they'd be like, oh, a half price blender or a, you know, teeth whitening strips or whatever it is, and you've got to try and sell the same stuff over and over again, but make it sound exciting and different. So that was a really good baptism of fire in terms of kind of writing copy that encourages people to buy. And yeah, kind of worked for a few years, but really it wasn't long. It was only about 3 years from moving to London and getting my first job that I ended up setting up my business. So I feel like it was a bit of a whirlwind.
What was the move like? Obviously, coming from, you know, elsewhere straight into you know, obviously a busy working world, but also personally as well. It's quite a busy social life. So, what was London like for you moving there?
To be absolutely honest with you, in the early days, it was quite lonely. I got a first class honours degree, and then I got a master's. So I really sort of felt as though I'd be in a really good position when I started applying for jobs in London. But we were on the back of the recession, and there were I applied for 100 jobs, didn't get any interviews, didn't get any success. And then I managed to get this 12k a year one. So for the first while, I mean, I was living with my ex-boyfriend at the time. So obviously I kind of had him and a couple of people around me, family, friend-wise, but I couldn't afford to go anywhere. So all this buzz of London life that was kind of going on around me, I wasn't working. So I actually felt really quite disconnected from it. But I knew that it was a great place for me to be. I think there was always this kind of energy to it. And most people, when you live in the north, kind of have, a lot of people anyway, not most, but a lot of people will be like, oh, London, oh, what are you going down London for? And I was always just kind of a bit intrigued by that. And I was like, it's going to be something, but I needed to get that first step on the career ladder in order to literally even get the train up to go into town. You know, it was quite a long time of just sort of like sitting at home on my own and applying for jobs. And I could have been anywhere really doing that and not paying London prices.
Yeah. So throughout your career, you've achieved quite a lot, to be honest with you. Most notably, obviously, what you mentioned earlier about the creative writing area, published poetry collection as well. So perhaps you could tell us a little bit more about that kind of area of your life.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I've always loved reading, and I've always loved writing, and I didn't ever really think that there was a profession to be made out of it. And in a lot of worlds, I think you still have to be realistic about, you know, what a profession looks like in the creative writing industries. If it's something that you want to earn your full salary from and earn a full living from, there's only a very small amount of people who are able to do that. And I know some of them, and they work incredibly hard to be able to do that. So for me, it was all about you know, playing with words and playing with language, and I'd always written poetry, and my master's actually was great in terms of teaching me how to transfer some of those skills. So in my job interviews, for example, I would always go in and go, look, you could I'm sure there's 10 people who've come to this interview that have got a marketing background, but what about something a bit different? Because you don't want your messaging and your brand to sound exactly the same as everybody else's. So I use that as a bit of an edge. And I think over time, I've really tried to bring the two worlds a lot closer together. And the poetry has kind of really helped me, actually. I think, you know, I do some spoken word, so like get up in these kind of embarrassing rooms and read out poems into a microphone and things like that. Even it pushes you to finish things. It pushes you to kind of put things out into the world and be vulnerable and let go as well of your interpretation of something, and give the reader and the audience full permission to take it on completely as their own now, and it doesn't belong to you anymore. So things like that have been super, super helpful to kind of help me on, you know, on both sides.
So when you think about writing your poetry, what is it about? What sort of poetry are you writing?
Well, funnily enough, Mark, I used to write a lot about going on bad dates because I had a lot of material. So there was a kind of split of sort of, I feel like when I'd go to these spoken word nights, there'd be a lot of heavy stuff. And don't get me wrong, like the collection that I've had published is quite heavy in terms of content, but I've always wanted to kind of have a bit of lightness to it and a bit of humor, and really poetry is how I kind of make sense of the things that happen to me. So depending on what phase of life I'm in, my current partner's like, why do you never write any poems about me? And I'm like, usually am I allowed to swear on this, or should
Yeah, of course you are. Yeah.
Okay, great. So there was a phrase that I heard years ago which I loved, which is if you don't want to be written about in a poem, don't fuck a poet. And if you don't want to be written about badly in a poem, don't fuck over a poet. And I honestly have like kept that in my head ever since.
Yeah. I think that's the same with a comedian in a way, isn't it? It's like, don't take the piss out of them because I'll take the piss out of you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think what was the question I was going to ask? There's a question about writer's block. So
Yes.
when you have writer's block, how do you deal with that? Because obviously this is poetry that's coming from the heart essentially, but there'll be times where I'm sure you have writer's block. So how do you deal with that?
Yeah, it's interesting actually with writer's block, because I feel as though there's different versions of it. You've got writer's block on a piece of work that you're actually working on, whether that be a poem or whether that's anything else, and you just reach a point where you can't move it any more forwards. And in that case, I'd say put it in a drawer and walk away from it and come back to it. There's a lot to be said for letting a poem marinate for a period of time, and usually you come back to it and you immediately, it's like doing a crossword. Sometimes you walk away from it and then you come back and you're like, oh yeah, that's so obvious now. And then there's the other kind of writer's block, which is like, I can't write anything. I've got nothing. I can't, you're sitting there with a complete blank page and you can't do anything at all. And I think there's so many different ways, I think, of attacking that. One is to sort of get up and move your location, change your environment, go for a walk. So often I've gone out in a huff because I've not been able to write something, and then ended up coming back with a voice note or a little memo full of loads of ideas. So I think changing your environment is a big one, and also getting over yourself. I think there's a real tendency, and especially with a lot of poets, because we are quite deep, tortured souls, and we sort of think of our work as like really, really important, and it's not. Ultimately, something is much better written down in any old form and committed to the page than it is stuck in your head going round and round and round. So I think remembering that you're not as important as you think you are sometimes is quite a good life lesson.
We come to Mac+Moore now. So tell us about the story behind the company and what your idea was behind it all. Obviously you've co-founded this with obviously your partner, Jess McIntyre. So tell us a little bit about that story behind it.
So the business itself actually came from redundancy, which weirdly enough, we've been going 8 years now, and I feel like at the moment the redundancy story is probably more pertinent than it has been for maybe the past few years, because I know so many people are going through that at the moment. And we were working together, we were made redundant from the company we were in, and we basically had this kind of light bulb moment of going, people think that working for a company is safer than running your own business. And that's just not really true anymore. You know, when you're not running the business, you're not privy to the conversations that are happening above your head. And really, that was quite liberating to realize that actually there's safety in, you know, like control of the direction, control of the people you work with. And it took a lot of the risk out of it for us. So essentially, when Jess and I met, we realized that we fitted together really well in terms of we complemented each other so much. I mean, some have called us the Ant and Dec of branding in the past, but I'm not sure about that one. But we do kind of have this sort of like rapport with each other, but also this kind of complementary but different skill set. And that was enough of an idea to go, we should build something on this. So the initial business was more of a plug-in marketing service, kind of going, look, we've sat in your shoes. We've both been in-house. We worked in agencies. So we get it from the other side. And I feel like that is quite a reassuring thing for people. And then as the business has evolved over the years, we've realized that we've got this real sweet spot in terms of brand foundation work. So as you said at the beginning, it's strategy, it's naming, it's positioning, it's core messaging, it's design, you know, all of those things that you essentially need to build your business, like build around your business in order to be distinctive, in order to connect with customers, get off the ground, you know, all of those objectives that people want. We've realized that those foundation pieces are where we're strongest.
Yeah, I think branding, in my opinion, certainly, and clients we work with, is that branding is your first touch point, I think, even to do with your website, your digital marketing, because, you know, digital marketing campaigns need proper branding. They need a strategy, they need a position, but it's also the same with a website. You know, from how we design a website is that we need your brand guidelines to then, you know, essentially make it come to life. So I do believe, and I do agree that that's very much the start point of a journey for a business, I think, whatever sort of stage they're at, to be honest with you.
And B2B especially, I mean, that's a big focus area for us, and I know that you're the same at making websites better. There's such an opportunity in B2B to inject more personality, to be, you know, to really have a great brand. I think people sometimes assume in B2B, or they think that, you know, they have to be safe, and safe means corporate, and corporate means dry and full of jargon, and it's just not true. You know, most of the buyers now are going to be millennial, if not younger, and millennials don't want dry. They want, you know, and Gen Z particularly, and Gen Alpha, like, you know, they want to feel like they're connecting with a set of values and a you know, founder and a story, way more than kind of, okay, this looks like a legit website. Yeah,
and I think there's lots of people that are guilty of thinking that brand is very much just a logo. You know, but brand is so much more than that, as we've obviously discussed. When you cast your mind back to when you started with Jess at Mac+Moore, did it feel like a risk or something that came quite naturally to you both, or, you know, why did you want to do your own business rather than, you know, perhaps going to work for someone else again?
I think it was hugely de-risked because we were both unemployed. I think I don't actually think we would have made the decision to set up the business had we not been made redundant. It never really crossed my mind. Jess, I think, had always wanted to do her own thing at some point, but didn't know who to do it with. And I think she said she wouldn't have done it by herself. So without that push, I don't think it would have happened at all, and definitely not for me. So in that situation, it felt quite de-risked because we were already at zero. And if, as you say, if it didn't work out, we would have absolutely gone, okay, we tried, and off we go down to you know, LinkedIn hiring page. But in that same way as it was de-risked, it was also massively pressurized because we didn't have a redundancy package from our previous employer, we'd literally been told we were paid for last month's work and there would not be any more money coming on the day that we were made redundant. So we actually didn't have a lot of time to make it work and to get it off the ground. So I think it was a balance really of sort of less risk in terms of neither of us were walking away from a safe job to take the gamble of setting this up. You know, who cares really if it didn't work out? We'd be fine and go and do something else. But equally, we needed to start making some money quite quickly. And that meant that we were full-time at it 100% from day one, which I think also has its own advantages.
Yeah, definitely. So we talked about types of clients that you work with. So obviously it's, you know, a lot of it's B2B. I mentioned some of the others that you work with as well. But who do you typically work with, or what's your kind of sweet spot, I guess?
Sweet spot, I would say, are two different types of clients. One is a scale up. So if they have kind of got a working brand, I mean, we've worked with all sorts. We've worked with literally they've got nothing right up to kind of, we've worked with like huge B2C brands like Now TV and Unilever and, you know, those kind of places. But the sweet spot for us is they've maybe had a brand, got it a bit off the ground, got, you know, proof of concept, MVP offering, whatever that is. And then they've outgrown that brand, but they now are ready to kind of go for Series A funding, or they need to really ramp up because, you know, the current branding just isn't connecting in the right way with customers. So that way we can really redefine the whole proposition and we can build in the kind of hierarchy of services or products and make something which is really robust and should technically last them, you know, positioning wise for at least 3 years, branding wise, hopefully 5 years. And that really gives them the great foundation to be on that runway, that runway of those sort of 3 to 5 years of maybe an exit or whatever that is. That's kind of one half. And then the other half is maybe a really established company. So it could be like a tech brand or a software company, or even a membership organization. We've done a lot in that space now, where they could have been going 20, 25, even up to 100 years. And it's like brand buckaroo, where over time something else has been added and something else has been added and something else has been added, and before you know it, it's the whole thing is overloaded and you can't recognize any kind of clear message in there. So we can work with an established brand to go, okay, well, who are you today and how can we weave in the legacy or, you know, the great aspects of your journey so far into helping you to get to where you want to be and to sort of fuel that next phase of growth. So really it's that kind of, you know, established sort of resetting, or a scale up who is looking to move fast and they need safe pair of hands that they can trust and work alongside with to get something that's really great in a short period of time.
Yeah, makes sense. So when you consider your USP, why do you think your clients choose you? What sets you apart from the competition, I suppose?
It's funny with this one really, because what we thought, and now we've gone on an exercise of asking all of our former clients why they work with us, and they're actually quite different. So the ones that we've had validated by going back to our clients and going, what's the best thing about working with us? One I think I just mentioned is speed. So we can actually we only take on a small number of projects at once, which means we've got this kind of line, which is like every client should feel like our most important client, because we don't work with a huge amount at any one time. So we can be fully focused on that project and get to an outcome quite quickly compared to other companies or other agencies. Working directly with us as the founders of the business, it has also been kind of flagged to us as a major plus. So in other bigger agencies, you might have the founder or the creative director meeting the client and signing off the proposal and kicking things off, and then the work gets farmed out to much more junior members of the team, maybe with less kind of interaction from those senior people. Whereas with us, you work with us on the project and we are working directly on it. We build a team around us, but we are literally there sort of at the coalface on everything. And then the final one is this kind of outside insider lens, we call it. So the fact that we have sat inside a lot of these businesses, but now being fundamentally on the outside looking in, when people kind of get to that point where they can't see the wood from the trees, we can quite helpfully navigate, okay, well, this is the problem and this is the solution, but in the middle of that you've got all of this sort of internal politics, or things that need to be navigated, that I think you can only know when you've sat on the inside and you can flip it from the other way around. So they would be the three things that we've been told the most is kind of why people like working with us.
Yeah, I think it's important to actually speak to previous clients or clients that you're working with currently to get that feedback. So I think it's important to allow your business to grow, but also it's just great to get that sort of feedback so you understand their client journey, I guess. Having met you previously and discussed your career path at length, obviously today, but also previously, you seem very self-assured in your quest. So where do you think that mentality or confidence comes from?
I actually think it was a really good question, because a lot of the time, like, my family say to me a lot, they're like, we don't know where you've come from, because like with the creative writing aspects and all that kind of thing, they're like, where's this come from? I don't know. But I do think that my parents had a lot to do with my mum was a nurse for 30 years. My dad was in the police for 30 years. He was a detective sergeant in the police, and they both instilled in me and my brother from a really young age this like strong work ethic. You show up early, not on time, you get your head down, you work really hard, you appreciate the value of money, and if you've earned your money, they made us both get jobs when we were, I think I was like 14 or 15 when I got my first job waitressing, and they really kind of pushed that you only get what you want from what you put in. So they really put that kind of strong work ethic into me, but they actually didn't really project any idea of like who they wanted me to be. So my mum was like, you are not going into the police, after watching my dad for 30 years come home and see what he had to deal with. So they let me go off and find out what I wanted to do, and there really wasn't any expectation. If I'd said to them, I'm going to work in a shop for my whole life, or I'm going to go and work for the government, or I'm going to go and be an air hostess, or I'm going to go like anything, they would have been really proud of me as long as they saw that I was showing up and I was working really hard at it.
Yeah. I think that's a really good aspect to that. I think when you think about your why or purpose in life, whether that's personally or professionally, but certainly personally, what would you say that is? Why do you do what you do, I suppose?
I think that being a woman in business has really amplified this idea that we need to do so much more, not just to help women, but just to help individuals who aren't from particular backgrounds, aren't maybe the most confident people in the room. Like, I've always been really loud and gobby and confident, but I only really realized when I moved to London, or even when I went to uni and kind of met people from a way more privileged background than I was like, oh, okay, this feels a bit jarring. I've never really realized that I could go into a space as a confident person and be like quite silenced and quite kind of pushed into a corner. And I've had to push against that a little bit. So I think for me, I've watched so many incredible women battle so much harder than male counterparts for things like investment, for things like equal pay, for things like a voice in the room. And there's been amazing female-run businesses that I've seen close down that I know is not because of a lack of talent or a lack of will or a lack of passion. It's a lack of resources. It's a lack of, sort of funding. It's through things that really are sort of societal issues, whether that's, from a financial or an educational perspective, that really does drive me. I don't believe in just kind of building a business for our sake. I really do want to kind of do it in a way to be able to give back. Sounds so twee to say, but I think I've sort of built a voice and I've built a platform, and if I can use that in a way which is useful for people. You know, I do mentoring, and you know, we try and basically tell bits of our story that maybe aren't as heard as often, you know, in other spaces. So I'd say that is a real big driver for me, is kind of trying to level the playing field in any small way that I can.
Our podcast is founded upon honesty and how testing times have impacted good or bad on our personal lives. So away from business, can you tell us about a challenging time in your life that really made you who you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, I spoke a little bit about my parents earlier, and the thing that springs to mind, actually, which I'd not thought about in a really long time before sort of reading through the questions for this podcast, is I remember there was a time when I was growing up where just sort of completely unexpectedly, both of my parents ended up in hospital at the same time. And they were actually in different hospitals for different reasons. And it was all sort of quite sudden how that happened. And essentially, I think the reason why I'd not thought about it for such a long time was sort of, that was a period of time which was so terrifying and so difficult, you know, kind of, I was only think about 14 or something at the time, and my brother was 11, and you know, we had to go to different hospitals twice a day and visiting hours, and all of a sudden it was like, oh, I'm on my own here, like trying to kind of figure all of this out. And that was really difficult. But I think at the time I kind of went into this mode of like, I am the rock, I am, you know, I'm going to look after everyone. And as much as that was necessary, probably as a bit of a survival instinct at that time, it kind of instilled something in me that has then taken a long time to really unpick.
Yeah.
It feels like such a badge of honor to say, like, I am a really strong person, you know, I am like there for everyone, I'm able to kind of, you know, support everyone and do what needs to be done. And that's a really young age to be taking on that kind of level of responsibility for everybody else, and including a lot of adults around me. And I think I wore that kind of strength as a bit of a badge of honor for years and years and years afterwards, which I think meant I didn't really consider myself as much in difficult situations. I would always be kind of, you know, no, I'm fine. And it's quite a northern thing as well, I think, to just be like, no, you get on with it, you know, suck it up. So I've spent quite a lot of time, I think, in my later years unpicking that and sort of going back and going, actually, there's probably more strength in vulnerability and, you know, more courage and more bravery, and being able to say, I'm actually not okay, or I do need help and I do need support, and not just trying to take on everything and take on the world all by yourself. So yeah, it's an interesting one. I think it was a difficult time, but almost dealing with the aftermath of that afterwards, in how those early pivotal things that happen in your life, how they shape the beliefs you have about yourself.
Yeah.
And some of them are useful and helpful, and I can still tap into that strength when we have a particularly difficult client. But you know, I try and like not bring that into all of the areas of my life, if that makes sense.
Well, just listening to you there, and obviously what you mentioned earlier about, you know, giving you guidance at a young age and really giving you that path, I suppose. I can really tell that your mum and dad are quite a massive part of your life. How much of a real impact have they really had on your life, not even as a child, but also today?
They honestly, my mum and dad, it sounds so simple to say, but like, they're so proud of me and they're so proud of my brother. And I really have taken that for granted. You know, there's obviously been kind of difficulties, and you know, every family has its stuff, right? And you know, we are absolutely no different. But my family, I think, has been through a lot. You know, not just that hospital incident, there's been a lot, you know, testing times in our family, and we've always kind of stuck together as a unit. And they have always just been really proud of me and really supportive of the things I've wanted to do, and not sort of judgmental. And I know people in my life where they don't have that at all. And you know, their parents would be quite kind of domineering, or they'll put their ideas and stamps on things. And my parents have just never really done that. And I think it's given me and my brother are, for example, very different people. And I think it's allowed us to go and do the things we personally want to do, without feeling like we have to kind of toe the line or live up to their expectations of us, because their expectations of us are they want us to be happy and healthy and, you know, doing what we want to be doing. And I think I'm very lucky. I've realized how lucky I am.
But obviously we've discussed a lot of different sort of areas, obviously business, personal life and all these other things. But to really get to know you a little bit more, I've got some trivia questions to ask you. So these are going to be quick fire questions. So if I start with favourite food.
So I just have to just say it and not do any chat?
Well, you can, but it's just sort of quick fire sort of questions. So you can give whatever answer you want. And I'll probably ask you, why did you pick that? But yeah.
Fine. So favourite food, I'd say buffalo chicken wings.
Nice. Yeah, good choice. Favourite alcoholic beverage?
I think a really great pint of Guinness is probably better than most other, you know, good versions of good drinks.
Have you been to the Guinness factory in Dublin?
Yes, yeah. I spend a lot of time in Dublin, actually. I've got a lot of friends there. So yeah, there's a couple of spots in Dublin which are like real old man Guinness pubs.
Yeah,
so that's given me my answer, to be honest.
Yeah. Favourite band or artist from the world of music?
So I'm a real indie kid from back in the day, and I would say ultimate favourite band is Arctic Monkeys.
Oh, good choice. Yeah, not that.
I've seen them a few times.
Yeah. Favourite TV programme or film?
And my favourite film is a Moulin Rouge. Love a musical.
TV programme?
I actually love, did you ever watch Green Wing?
I've heard of it. I've not seen it though.
So there's like, I'd say most of my appeal is kind of like weird, odd Channel 4 comedy sitcom kind of shows from the like early noughties.
Yeah.
So Green Wing is just this really surreal comedy show based in a hospital, and it's something that I would always go back to again and again.
Yeah. We were talking about this in the office the other day because you just reminded me, Channel 4 comedy program called Catastrophe. You ever seen it?
Love it. Sharon Morgan, Rob Delaney as a couple.
Yes.
Amazing.
Yeah, I thought you might be into that. So yeah, I was going to say, if you haven't seen it, I'd recommend it. Favourite holiday destination?
Well, I was going to say Dublin, but I've already mentioned Dublin, so I won't say that again. My cousins have got a place in France, which I've been to the last couple of years, and we're going again in a couple of weeks. So I think that's a real like little escape from everything and go and tuck myself away in France. So yeah.
Yeah. Favourite famous person?
Very hard to say conclusively. I will say a recent favourite famous person. I love stand-up comedy. And I went to see Tim Key recently, and he was absolutely outstanding live, and it's really put him to the top of my comedy list. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah. Biggest pet peeve?
I've got two. One is, because I'm northern, as I've mentioned many times, unfriendliness, which I think is different to rudeness, because rudeness is obvious as pet peeve. I think everyone has that, but it really annoys me when people are just sort of needlessly unfriendly.
Yeah.
So that's one. And the other one is, it really annoys me when people don't ask questions. I mean, this podcast, you are like top of my list because all you've done is ask questions. But you meet a lot of people these days who they just talk and they don't ask any questions. It's not like a dialogue back and forth.
Yeah.
I find that absolutely bewildering.
What's your favourite memory from your life?
Oh, I should probably say something really sentimental, but I'm not going to. I think I love going to see live music and music festivals in particular. I absolutely love. And there's a little festival in Ireland called Electric Picnic that I've been to a few times. And when I went a couple of years ago, I ran this sort of half marathon to get there, which was a whole saga in and of itself. Because I'd never run more than like a 5K before, and then that was the only way you could get a ticket. was to basically sign up to this charity run. And I think there was something about the endorphins coming off the back of that run, then going straight into a music festival where you're surrounded by like your best people and going to see all these bands and, you know, having quite a lot of alcohol. And it honestly, when I think about that, it was the sort of the longest consistent period of just like joy that I've had. Like 3 days of just being so happy and just kind of bouncing around. So I would say that's definitely up there.
Yeah. What inspires you on a daily basis?
Well, I'm not going to say LinkedIn, even though I have to spend a lot of time on there. I mean, most people who have me on LinkedIn are probably like, you are posting on LinkedIn every day. No, I would say I've got 2 little nephews who are they're like toddler and baby age, and I've always had kind of little people around me, but this is the closest I've come to kind of, you know, having like little tiny family members again after growing up. And honestly, like the sorts of questions that my little nephew Oliver asks him, it's so obvious. Anyone who spends time with really little kids, I mean, I'm not sure if you've got kids, but it's I feel like there's just a real kind of stupid wonder. Like he asks ridiculous things, but he's so like, you know, hypnotized by like the answers that it just really does make you kind of remember. And especially to pivot completely, things like, you know, all the work that needs to happen with climate change and, you know, actually creating a better world and all those things, you know, this is for them. This is not for us. This is actually absolutely for kind of what world do we want them to have. And they are going to grow up very respectful of women. So that's going to be my role.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's worth saying. But it's the next generation though, isn't it? And if we can do what we can to help them, then that's the main thing. Best piece of advice you've been given?
I think Baz Luhrmann actually had it bang on when he said wear sunscreen.
Do you know what? Honestly, that is probably one of the best answers I've ever had, because that is a great song, and I've listened to that for God knows how many times. And that song, like as soon as you listen to it, all the words just sort of relate to you. I know it's from a different sort of generation and stuff, but my word, it's a great song. Yeah.
I listened to it again recently because I was working on something and it kind of like popped into my head, and I just was absolutely, as you just said, like all of the different elements, you go, God, no matter when that was written, you could listen to it probably in 100 years and so much of it would still be really relevant. And yeah, I think that he's basically nailed advice.
Yeah, yes, yeah, I completely agree. Natalie, look, honestly, it's one of my most favourite episodes, I've got to be honest. So thank you for taking the time to discuss your life lessons and career to date. So to finish the episode, perhaps you would like to tell our listeners where they can find Mac+Moore. Absolutely.
Well, as I've said, you can find me on LinkedIn, bleating and screaming into the void on a daily basis. So we are at Mac+Moore, MACANDMOORE on most platforms, Instagram and LinkedIn. I think we're off Twitter now because it's dodgy. And then you can find me personally on LinkedIn under my name.
Perfect. Thank you, Natalie. So yeah, join us next time for a brand new guest as we continue more life lessons from the world of business.
Thanks, Mark.
So that's it for this episode of People Behind Brands. If you like what you heard today, do yourself a favour, subscribe to our exclusive content now and follow us on our social media when you search People Behind Brands podcast or at podcast PBB. Join us next time for a brand new guest as we explore more life lessons from the world of business. We'll see you soon. Ta-da!